Grades. Final grades came in, leaving 3 withdrawals on my transcript and 2 Bs. Not great, considering most people at BYU cry if they get an A-, because we're all on this holy quest to become useless corporate drones for some reason. I had withdrawn from each class that wasn't a business school prerequisite. I hadn't told anyone. I was ashamed. School had become a burden that year, and my every action was damage control for my tanking GPA. I used to like school, even if I never derived my personal worth from grades. Studying at BYU had once empowered me to become a more complete person. I could learn, expand my knowledge, improve at writing, and eventually work while writing on the side. That had always been my plan, even if my family discouraged even the utterance of the word writing. Despite already being on my way out of Provo, I applied for the Marriott School of Business. Applying had been my goal for the last 2 years. I needed to apply, even if just to know before leaving. The school year was done. My sojourn at BYU was at an end. Now I had to figure out what to do next. Alongside the end of the semester came yearly eviction notices from student housing, telling us all to get the hell off their property before they call the goddamn cops. I said my goodbyes to Wyatt, Will, and Adam, with whom I had spent the year. They were great roommates. Better than Mason ever would have been. I would never see any of them again, but they've still got a place in my heart as my favorite roommates. I rented a new apartment across town. Summer rent was cheap, and I had 2 jobs lined up. The only problem was that I had to move out of Heritage Halls 2 days before my new apartment would let me move in. I even called the office of my new apartment to ask if I could move in early because I would otherwise be homeless, and yeah, they were totally aghast at my absurd request, even though my future room was empty. All the apartments have the same move-out, move-in dates, so it's a little hard not to feel like they don't care about you and view the students as a number on their corporate spreadsheet. This here, aside from all the various forms of bullshit discrimination, is the biggest pile of crap in Provo. Student housing companies are straight-up predatory. They all have out-of-state corporate owners that act as a shield against accountability and use opaque algorithms to set rent prices as high as the market will allow. They can enforce any asinine policies they please, and students just have to deal with it because they have nowhere else to go. On my last day at Heritage Halls, I packed all my belongings into my car, got on Grindr, and found myself a place to sleep. 2 days and 2 hookups later, I moved into my new apartment. I worked 65 hours a week, spread between 2 jobs. I also maintained several relationships, none of which lasted longer than a month. My grueling work week and abysmal dating life left little time for writing. 15-minute breaks became writing sprints, during which I talked to no one and sat hunched over my phone in break rooms. I was beginning work on something new. This book began as a chronological document of everything I had written or photographed. Shortly after I moved, a simple discovery sent my mind into book mode. I plugged my iPad in only to realize that it had collected all my text messages over the last year. The memories were there. Every conversation with Easton and Claire. I copied everything into a 30,000-word document and began making chapter segments. I was so baffled by how well the story seemed to fit a standard structure that I knew I had to write it, even if just for myself. Naming the book was easy enough. In my mind, it was either Closeted or That Time I Lost My Shit and Cried About a Boy for 8 months. But that felt a little too close to the back cover of New Moon. I stopped the project soon after starting, knowing I wasn't quite ready to begin. As I promised Bishop Stoll, I contacted my new bishop. I told him about the situation, and nothing happened. He never followed up with me. A month later, I contacted Mom's bishop. Nothing. Somehow, I always seemed to slip through the cracks. No bishop wanted to work with a gay student wondering if repentance was worth the effort. I went to church a few more times and then stopped altogether. It felt strange. After years of clinging to the church to ground me in an acceptable world, my faith didn't just die. It became irrelevant. I still didn't know how to handle this ambivalence. Life was a slog, and while I hoped for improvement soon, I was far too cynical to hope for something better. But all wasn't terrible. A new digital sensation was sweeping the nation. That's right, boys and girls! Pokémon Go was now live, and spending time outside was in. The Provo City Library was just about the coolest place in town, because there was a Pokestop in the front yard. Every night, hundreds of students would gather outside the library. That alone convinced me to attend USGA a handful of times that summer. USGA's mere existence had once stabilized my life, giving me a community in a hostile world. And now I was even saying goodbye to that. I received an email from the Marriott School of Business on July 12th. Final decisions on admissions to the business program. I clicked the link to a page informing me that my application had been denied. 2 years of college ended with every possible form of rejection. I didn't tell anyone. I was still too ashamed of having failed. Mom called as I was stewing in my hatred of absolutely everything. I considered rejecting the call, but answered anyway. "Johnny?" Mom asked. "Yeah?" I paced around the narrowing confines of my suffocating white room. "When's the last time you spoke to your dad?" Mom's voice was hesitant. I kicked my bed, a spike of panic consuming me. I don't know. A month or 2, or longer." "Why does he think you're about to commit suicide?" Mom asked. I growled. "Ignore him. I'm not interested in talking to him about that. I mentioned I was suicidal on accident, and he hasn't stopped hounding me since." Mom grunted. "Well, could you please call him so he stops asking me about it and implying I'm not doing enough?" Mom and Dad hadn't spoken in years. That he would call her over this infuriated me. "No!" "He's just worried. Call him. Tell him you're fine and he'll stop." I waited for hours, telling myself I shouldn't be annoyed and just call him. Part of me was ready to write him off, but I knew that would hurt us both and accomplish nothing. I left my apartment. I lived next to the football stadium, so I walked toward it in a loop. "Hello?" he asked. "Hi." "What is going on?" Dad asked in a voice that instantly grated on me. "I don't understand why you haven't talked to me for months." My pace toward the stadium quickened. Calling was a mistake. I couldn't do this without throwing all of my emotions at him. And that's what happened. I was suicidal all 3 years of high school. You never knew. You didn't ask. I was just on my own. I stopped myself. Let him chew on that. "I'm sorry," Dad said. "I wasn't there." "Yeah, you weren't there. So your sudden concern isn't welcome." My voice was biting, judgmental, channeling all my malice and ill will toward him. "You can't expect me to hear what you were going through at BYU and not be concerned," Dad said. "That's exactly what I expect. That was our relationship my entire life," I said. "I told you I'm suicidal on a whim. I wasn't thinking. But now you're all concerned, and I don't buy it. Where were you when I was in high school?" "What am I supposed to do?" Dad asked. "Never mention my mental health again," I said. "That is not a form of help I will accept from you." Dad did not respond, and I held my silence. I passed the cougar, snarling on the southwest corner of the stadium. Dad broke the silence. "I was worried because I knew you were having a difficult time at BYU. That type of environment can be hard, and I just wanted to make—" "Stop talking about BYU," I yelled into the phone. "I was there. I lived it. And yes, I know what it's like. Your warnings aren't welcome. You've never been a part of my life in that way. And I see no reason to start now." Dad was silent for a long enough time that I began to wonder if he was still on the line. "You know, you don't have to insist that you're alone. This year was hard for you, and you clearly don't want to talk about it, and that's fine. But insisting that no one cares about you doesn't change reality. I'm worried about how you isolate yourself." "Yeah, well, the behavior was kind of inevitable. Growing up at odds with everything around me and then having you skip town," I said. "I had to just learn not to rely on certain people." Dad groaned. "The divorce had nothing to do with you." "Didn't it, though?" I asked. "You can't say that you and Mom were the only ones involved and then expect me to have no feelings about it. I lost my dad that day. You had a choice. I didn't. You got to just move on and live how you wanted. I got to stay home and plan my death." "I'm sorry, I wasn't there," Dad said. Maybe I don't understand what you were going through at that time, but is it so ridiculous to suggest I might understand part of what you're going through now? How do you figure? I asked. The church makes no space for anyone who clashes with their rigid worldview. Isolating you is part of the control mechanism. Oh, the control mechanism, I said in sarcasm. Really going with the tinfoil hat on this one. Dad exhaled in annoyance. I had to leave everything. Maybe I could have done more for you, but I didn't feel like I had any options. Sometimes life is just like that. You make the best of what you have. And you know what? It's just never good enough for some people.